February 20, 2022. Russia blows past another off-ramp in the Ukraine crisis. Moscow, CNN. For those watching the Ukraine crisis, February 20th was supposed to be a date to watch. The 2022 Beijing Winter Olympics ended on Sunday, and some observers worried the closing ceremony might be a convenient moment for Russian President Vladimir Putin to launch military action. After all, history does rhyme. Russia escalated a brief conflict with Georgia in 2008 during the Beijing Summer Olympics, and Russia began its slow-rolling annexation of Crimea at the tail end of the 2014 Winter Olympics in Sochi. But Sunday also offered Russia a potential opening for de-escalation. After all, massive joint Russian military exercises in Belarus were slated to end on February 20th, and the Kremlin had suggested Russian troops would go home after they finished, without giving concrete dates. Belarusian Foreign Minister Vladimir Makiy even said, "Not a single Russian soldier or piece of Russian military equipment will remain in Belarus once the drills ended." Instead, Russia blew past another potential off-ramp in the crisis. In a Sunday statement released by the Belarusian military on Telegram, Belarusian Defense Minister Lieutenant General Viktor Krinin said the Russians and Belarusians would continue their drills, saying the increase in military activity near the external borders of the Union state, Russia and Belarus, and the heightened tensions in Donbass necessitated the decision. Eyes remained on Donbass Sunday, as evacuees from separatist-controlled parts of eastern Ukraine continued to cross into southern Russia and from separatist-controlled regions, while reports filtered in of more shelling. Local officials in Russia's Rostov region have declared a state of emergency after separatist leaders on Friday ordered the evacuation of civilians from the region. But Ukraine's defense minister Alexei Reznikov laid blame on separatists in the breakaway Donetsk and Luhansk republics for escalating the situation, accusing Russian-backed separatists of putting heavy weaponry in civilian areas and using it to bombard areas under Ukrainian government control. Blinken says Russia's playbook for an invasion of Ukraine is moving forward, but war can still be averted. Washington, CNN. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said Sunday that Russia's playbook for an invasion of Ukraine is moving forward, though he said there still is a chance for diplomacy to avert a war. As we've described it, everything leading up to the actual invasion appears to be taking place, Blinken said on CNN's State of the Union on Sunday. Ukraine's defense ministry reported more than 100 ceasefire violations in eastern Ukraine on Saturday and said that shelling continued into Sunday, while Russian troops remain in Belarus to continue military exercises that were supposed to have concluded. Blinken told CNN's Dana Bash he was concerned that the extension of the exercises was another sign that Russia was setting the stage to invade, following false flag operations this week and the accumulation of more than 150,000 Russian forces along Ukraine's border. Now they're justifying the continuation of exercises that they said would end now, the continuation indefinitely of those quote-unquote exercises on the situation in eastern Ukraine, a situation that they created by continuing to ramp up tensions, Blinken said. Still, Blinken said the U.S. would continue to try to find a last-ditch diplomatic path. He said President Joe Biden is willing to talk to Russian President Vladimir Putin, at any time, in any format, if it will help prevent a war, saying the Biden administration will continue to take whatever steps it can to try to convince Moscow not to invade Ukraine. We believe President Putin has made the decision, but until the tanks are actually rolling, and the planes are flying, we will use every opportunity and every minute we have to see if diplomacy can still dissuade President Putin from carrying this forward, Blinken said. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky was in Germany on Saturday, where he met with Vice President Kamala Harris at the Munich Security Conference. Zelensky said that he was urging the U.S. and Europe not to wait to put in place sanctions against Russia, arguing that they wouldn't help Ukraine if they only were invoked after an invasion had already begun. Blinken said on Sunday that the U.S. did not want to unveil the sanctions ahead of time because that would allow Russia to try and plan against them. The purpose of the sanctions in the first instance is to try to deter Russia from going to war, he said. As soon as you trigger them, that deterrent is gone, and until the last minute, as long as we can try to bring a deterrent effect to this, we're going to try to do that. Blinken said that if Putin goes forward with an invasion, the US and NATO have been clear they're going to come down on him and Russia very, very hard. Asked if Putin could be bluffing, Blinken said, "There's always a chance, but every indication that we've seen, every move that he's made, that has followed the play that we laid out for the world to see in front of the United Nations Security Council. He is following the script almost to the letter. Everything we're seeing suggests that this is dead serious, that we are on the brink of an invasion," he added. But Putin still has options on the table if he chooses to take a diplomatic off-ramp to the tensions, Pentagon Press Secretary John Kirby said Sunday. "We have made serious proposals and talked about changing, for instance, the scope and scale of some of our exercises in Europe, being willing to talk about offensive missile capabilities in Europe. We have certainly put forward other proposals to try to convince Mr. Putin that we're serious," Kirby told Fox. He also made clear the issue of Ukraine's membership in NATO, however, is an issue for Ukraine and for NATO. That is not something that Mr. Putin can simply institute a veto over or decide for himself, he said. And the U.S. would not recognize the ceding of Crimea or any other territory in eastern Ukraine to Russia as a way to avoid war, Blinken told CBS Margaret Brennan Sunday. No, the secretary said when asked on Face the Nation if the U.S. would use that tactic as a diplomatic way to avoid a larger war. Meanwhile, President Sauli Niinisto of Finland, which shares a border with Russia, told Bash in a separate interview Sunday that Putin has behaved in a way which is very difficult to predict. It's very difficult to say and define what the other person actually, deep down, is. But so far, I would say that he has behaved in a way which is very difficult to predict, but that might be also intentional, namely to behave in that way, because that brings confusion to surroundings, Niinisto said. Blinken is scheduled to meet later this week with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov in Europe, in what would be another round of diplomatic talks that have gone on for weeks as Russia's troops have continued to mass on Ukraine's border. But Blinken said the meeting would be called off in the event of an invasion. It all depends on what Russia does in the coming days, he said. If it doesn't invade, I'll be there. Meanwhile, the massing of Russian forces around Ukraine's borders appears to have continued, according to U.S. intelligence estimates. A U.S. official with direct knowledge of the intelligence told CNN Russia now has arrayed close to 75% of its conventional forces parked at Ukraine's doorstep, pointing to a high level of readiness to attack. So is diplomacy dead? Not entirely. Putin and French President Emmanuel Macron spoke by phone Sunday and agreed to continue to keep the dialogue open at various levels regarding the situation in Ukraine, the Kremlin said. A sticking point, however, remains the Minsk agreement, which the Kremlin insists is the only way to resolve the crisis. But the Kiev government sees it as a hastily devised agreement it was forced to accept at gunpoint. And Dmitry Peskov, Putin's spokesperson, had a word of caution for leaders engaging with the Russian leader by phone. Speaking to Pavel Zarubin, host of the TV program Moscow. Kremlin. Putin, Peskov suggested the Kremlin was prepared to disclose confidential discussions of high-level talks with other world leaders to counter what he described as deliberate and misleading leaks by foreign officials. I hope that we will not live in a world where we have to read out the transcripts of the closed part of the president's talks, Peskov said. But when it is necessary to prove the correctness of our president, we can and will do anything. New intel adds to U.S. fears that Russia is readying for military action. CNN, the U.S. has intelligence indicating orders have been sent to Russian commanders to proceed with an attack on Ukraine, according to two U.S. officials and another source familiar with the U.S. intelligence. The intelligence regarding the order to tactical commanders and intelligence operatives is one of several indicators the U.S. is watching to assess if Russian preparations have entered their final stages for a potential invasion. Other indicators, such as electronic jamming and widespread cyber attacks, have not yet been observed, according to some of the sources. The sources cautioned that orders can always be withdrawn or that it could be misinformation meant to confuse and mislead the U.S. and allies. Related, the latest on the Ukraine-Russia crisis. The intelligence was learned last week and informed comments by President Joe Biden and Secretary of State Antony Blinken, according to another U.S. official. Biden said on Friday that he believes Putin has made the decision to invade, a comment echoed by Vice President Kamala Harris and by Blinken on Sunday. Blinken said the Russian playbook is moving forward. We believe President Putin has made the decision, Blinken said Sunday in an interview on CNN's State of the Union. He continued, but until the tanks are actually rolling and the planes are flying, we will use every opportunity and every minute we have to see if diplomacy can still dissuade President Putin from carrying this forward. The Washington Post first reported on the orders being given. Biden held a National Security Council meeting on Sunday about the situation in Ukraine with his top advisors including Blinken, Harris, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin and National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, all of whom were in Europe over the weekend discussing with allies the path forward to addressing the crisis. As the president has said, "We believe that Putin has made his decision, period," Harris told CNN during a press gaggle in Munich on Sunday, after meeting with leaders including Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky on Saturday. Harris emphasized that the U.S. and its allies were still trying to resolve the crisis diplomatically, but that the path was narrowing. "They are uncoiling and are now poised to strike," Austin said in remarks from Lithuania on Saturday, adding that troops were moving into the right kinds of positions to be able to conduct an attack. Adding to concerns that Russia may be planning a large-scale attack is the dramatic escalation of ceasefire violations in eastern Ukraine in recent days, which Ukraine has blamed on Russia-backed forces in Ukraine's Donbas region. Russia, in turn, has claimed that Ukraine is planning a large-scale offensive in Donbas, necessitating a heavier pro-Russian military presence there. Blinken told the Munich Security Conference on Friday that the recent escalation in eastern Ukraine is part of a scenario that is already in play of creating false provocations, of then having to respond to those provocations and then ultimately committing new aggression against Ukraine. Earlier Sunday, the White House abruptly announced that Biden would be traveling to Wilmington, where he'd remain for the President's Day holiday. But the trip was abruptly canceled on Sunday afternoon, according to a White House official, as the president was on the phone with French President Emmanuel Macron for a short call of 15 minutes. Thank you for watching our videos every day.